Hello, everyone. Welcome to 1.5 Degrees, the podcast where together we explore the science, solutions, and stories involved in the fight against climate change. I'm your host, Heidi Pan, speaking with the professionals behind the latest research, policies, culture, and innovations shaping our response to global environmental challenges. For today's episode, we are joined by Eugene Kirpichov, who is the co-founder and executive director of Work on Climate, a nonprofit focused on building the workforce we need in the face of climate change, to discuss the climate talent transition, starting a nonprofit, and more. In a past life, Eugene was a software engineer with Google, but he left to focus on climate, and since his goodbye note went viral on LinkedIn, has helped several thousand people land jobs working on climate solutions. Today, Work on Climate is focusing on the full scale of the climate talent transition, hundreds of millions of people across all roles and sectors, by rallying the power of the entire mainstream talent ecosystem. Eugene's story and his work have been featured by Fast Company, CNBC, The Weather Channel, New York Times, EDF, and other venues. Thank you so much for joining us today, Eugene. It's truly, truly an honor.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
To start our conversation, a part of the mission is to reinvent pathways into climate jobs and climate entrepreneurship. It needs reinventing, and what is the rest of the mission of Work on Climate?
Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about why something like Work on Climate is needed. So the reason is that we're undergoing a transition in the economy that is comparable to the introduction of the internet or to introduction of electricity. And it has a massive impact on the workforce. For example, when the internet was introduced, it wasn't just that, internet nerds found internet jobs. It was that basically everybody's job started to have something to do with the internet. A bunch of new business models appeared. There were internet-focused companies, internet-focused roles within non-internet-focused companies. Every role started to have a component related to it. And it's the same with climate. So we're going into a new economy, and we need a new set of skills in existing roles, a lot of new roles, a lot of new business models served by existing roles and new roles, and so on. And this transition is literally as big as the entire economy. So it's a lot of people. And we need to pull off this transition very quickly, much faster than the workforce transition happened for previous transformations. For example, for comparison, we got to having about 25 million software engineers in 40 years. And here we need to get to hundreds of millions of people globally in 10 years. So the market will not solve this. Or more like the market will solve this, but it will be far too late by the time it does. So we have a very big, very urgent problem in our hands. The only way to solve the problem of this scale is by going back to the systems that the workforce is coming from in the first place and creating change there. So that's where we're going with our work. Even though what we're known for is our work on serving the first wave of this workforce, which is people who are actively looking to work on climate. That's where we made our name with our community. That's where we started when that was the only part of the problem we knew about. But yeah, then it became clear, even after our community became the world's largest communities of the sort, and after it helped thousands of people find jobs and dozens of them start companies. It sounds like a lot, but when you put it into the context of the full workforce, it's nothing. And it became clear that we need to be doing the full scale of the problem by working with the systems that produce the workforce, such as schools, accreditors, economic developers, standards bodies, departments of education and labor, professional societies of all kinds, community organizations, and so on. And so now we have two streams to our work. One of them is continuing our work on the community, but with an eye towards impacting the wider systems. And I can talk more about that later as to how. But the second stream of our work is directly focused on systems change. And we're building a new industry body whose purpose is to help all of these types of workforce shaping institutions level up. That's about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I personally am so grateful that Work on Climate is a resource that's available. Personally, I'm going into college and really thinking about, as a person, working or aspiring to work in climate, what that transition could look like, or even I haven't even, kind of had a job yet, but I guess more on that question about transitioning, or even just those who want to start to work in climate, who are in my position. And I mean, you were at one point also one of these people. I mean, one of the main reasons that you found is as to why people don't work in climate are psychological. I guess like could you run through your experience with those psychological barriers yourself and what helped you overcome them and what was that kind of spark that led you to transition?
Yeah, so by far the biggest reason that people don't work in climate is because they don't know they can. That
Mhm.
comes even before all the psychological barriers. The psychological barriers stand on their path once they start looking, but the vast majority of people are not even looking simply because they don't know that it's a possibility. They don't know that it could possibly need their skills. They don't know what climate jobs are. We actually just published some research that puts some hard numbers on this.
Mhm. Mhm.
And something like when we ask even climate concerned and climate alarmed Americans, what type of action would be most impactful if more Americans did this? Only 12% of respondents put work, which is crazy. It's insane that people think that work is less impactful than personal,
Mhm.
sustainable choices in their
It's
personal
so much
life.
of,
Or
it's a big part of your life. It should be a part of the, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like if you think, for example, you could put a few $1,000 of economic value into buying sustainable products per year, or you can put $500,000 of your economic value into into building climate solutions. There is just no question
Mhm.
about what
Mhm.
is more impactful, and people don't know that. So
Mm.
that's the biggest barrier. But once people do start looking, and by the way, I should preface this by saying that the people actively looking for climate jobs, it's a very important, but it's a small part of what the climate workforce is going to be. The absolute majority of people working on building climate solutions will be doing it just because it's a cool job, not because they care about climate.
Mm.
The same is the case, with technology jobs. So um, the barriers that people face once they do start looking, yeah, they face disorientation. So like by now, maybe they know that maybe there's a possibility that they could find work there, but they have no idea what it's going to look like. They don't know much about climate solutions. It all feels like drinking from a fire hose, which makes sense because climate solutions are about decarbonizing every part of the economy. And like most
Yeah.
people are not familiar with the entire scope of the economy. So there's a lot to learn.
Mhm.
People face barriers, doubting themselves and being unsure whether their skills apply or where they apply, or which of the solutions they could apply to would be more impactful, where to get the skills, what skills they need. And Also, like climate jobs, there's a lot of them and the number is growing, but there is a lot fewer of them than non-climate jobs. So this
Mhm.
is very much like a regular job search, but on nightmare difficulty,
Yeah.
because there's
I,
simply fewer of these jobs.
yeah, no, I definitely personally relate to all of those kind of psychological barriers that you mentioned, and also just even before that, that was really insightful.
Hmm.
I mean, like, I guess like also another one is related to like financial circumstances as well and like security, because that's not
Hmm.
currently supported in by a lot of climate jobs, it seems. But I guess also I'm very curious as to like, leaving Google and how you came to that decision. Was there any like pushback that you experienced? And if you did experience any pushback, how did you navigate those conversations?
So I'll first comment on what you just said about the financial security.
Mm.
So this isn't something inherent to climate jobs. It's mostly something inherent to startup jobs. If we're talking about jobs at climate startups, they generally pay the same amount of money as non-climate startups at this stage. But like obviously, if you're used to making 500,000 a year at Google, and then like you're being asked to work for equity and 80K, yeah, it's a change. And like many people
Mhm, mhm,
can't afford it. But Anyways, I could talk at much greater length about that. It's worth noting that startup jobs, again, are a tiny fraction of all climate jobs. Anyways, though, so you were asking about whether I experienced any kind of pushback. No, not a lot. I mean, obviously, my manager at Google tried to convince me to stay at Google, but he was respectful when his arguments did not resonate with me.
mhm,
My parents were supportive. They've just generally been supportive of everything I do. Like my friends were supportive. So maybe some people experience pushback, but I wasn't one of them.
mhm. Cool that you were supported. And yeah, no, that's definitely a good disclaimer to have. And I mean, climate really is, as you say, going to be a part of every aspect of work. So yeah, definitely. I guess like also, what were some of the maybe some learning curves going from engineering to becoming the executive director of a nonprofit? And I guess I've also heard that you were initially or that work on climate kind of started as a side project in comparison to a startup that you were planning on. I guess like I'm really curious about that process.
Yeah, indeed. So Work on climate started simply because my goodbye note on LinkedIn went viral, and suddenly, like thousands of people were writing to me and my co-founder at the time, who was also leaving Google together with me. And we thought, well, these people are right there. They clearly want help. So let's start a community and like see how it goes. And meanwhile, let's figure out what we're going to really do.
Mm.
And as we both navigated that path, first together, then separately, um, Work on Climate continued being like a very successful side project. And then at some point, as I was looking into a different startup that I wanted to start, which was in geospatial AI, I thought like, okay, if I'm gonna take this geospatial AI thing seriously, I need to hand over Work on Climate to someone else. And
Mm.
to do that, I need to like write a strategy for it so that they don't, mess it up. And so I sat down for 2 weeks and thought about what the future of Work on Climate should be, and was like, holy shit, like I need to be doing this. There's no question.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mm.
yeah, and yeah, then I went all in and very quickly discovered that I don't actually have the skills to run a nonprofit, and that I need to learn every one of those skills from scratch.
Mm.
I think there was almost nothing that transferred. I mean, I guess the technology aspect of running it was easy. That's about it. I think I had like some of the communication skills that are needed, maybe 10% of the needed communication skills. Everything else I had to relearn.
Mm.
Yeah, it was very difficult, and still is. I that This is not something that I would recommend unless you feel that you can't not do it.
Mm. That's so true. I
Mhm.
guess like for those who think they might want to do something like this, starting a new company or a nonprofit, I guess like what does it do and what does it don't for when you're co-founding a new company, or founding a company? And I mean, I guess like even co-founding in itself, like working with other people, that's also a big concern for some people that are, working on
Mhm.
projects in the climate and in general.
Mhm. So your question is, what are like some do's and don'ts when starting a company?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, the biggest one is I'm probably going to be saying some tropes here, but the biggest one is like don't do it unless you're absolutely obsessed. You're not going to be able to do it if you can imagine yourself doing something else. Just trust me, you won't have the resilience. Uh, so that's one thing. Other than that, yeah, obviously, another trope is going to be that it's really important to like listen to more experienced people and be humble. That's
Mm.
something that I was lacking. I came into this after like being at the top of my field, uh, and I brought that confidence to this, while this time it was misplaced.
Oh.
So I was very confident in decisions that ended up being the wrong decisions. I like had a good amount of conflicts with people because of that, where I felt like, well, I'm right, so I just need to push harder. Like that's the key to it, not listening to people, and that was obviously wrong and problematic in many ways. So I had to learn a lot of that. So yeah, make sure that you like are like mentally and socially in a place to do the people work that goes into starting a company. I guess it might apply differently to different types of companies, but it definitely applies to starting a nonprofit, and probably to a large extent to many other types of companies too. Yeah, the other things probably relate more to selecting what to work on, or how to work on it. Yeah, that's another one where I will advise against having excessive confidence in what you're doing. Like I strongly Yeah, so again, I was coming into this from a career in software where either your stuff works or it doesn't. And you
Mm.
can like sit in a cave and think for a month and then come out of it with a solution to a problem where you know that you solved it because it was
Mhm.
passing your tests that you wrote in the cave. And that's not how it works with anything that faces people.
Mm.
So there, it's important to like be clear about what you do and don't know, and like start with experiments rather than spend a long time building something big that then confronts reality and turns out that actually you were wrong about what is even the problem that needs solving.
Mm.
It's incredibly easy, especially as somebody who has had success before, to think that you got it right. And no, like instead of mastering the art of getting it right, master the art of doubting whether you got it right.
Mm. That's really good advice. I guess like also what were some of those learning curves in detail that like maybe what were the things that you got wrong, I guess, that you figured out in the process?
Hmm. Uh, well, let me think. Well, a lot of them had to do just generally with how I communicate and relate to people. A lot of them were just like smaller tactical decisions about like whether, I don't know, to hire for one role or to hire for two smaller roles, or like where to take the organization's strategy, like to, for example, focus the community on connection or on upskilling or on something else. So, or to maybe like invest more in the part of the work that is specifically building the industry body and maybe disinvest from building the community and so on. So there were a lot of things here where I felt very confident about a certain direction. And then after a lot of thought, the better answer emerged that was maybe not even among the options I was considering. But had to really think about it for a long time and talk to a lot of people.
This is a question that I ask every episode.
Mhm.
If you could turn back time, butterfly effects aside, and tell your younger self something that you've learned from life so far, what would you say to them?
Oh, from life so far. Um, Depends how much younger, I guess. Yeah, I think I would. Um, well, if I was able to tell something to my like way younger self before I even left Google, I would I would say leave now.
Mm,
Yeah, I would say leave now and like start looking for what you're gonna do in climate now. It's out there. Like just start talking to people, and you'll find that there's more than meets the eye. That's one thing. Um, there would be obviously downsides to that. Um, like I actually don't know if work on climate would have gotten this far if I left earlier.
mm,
Um, but that would be one thing. Another thing would be again on a personal level, I can invest more in interpersonal skills and ask other people more about whether you actually are as good as you think you are.
mm,
Because uh, probably not. Um, yeah, like just investing a lot more in working with people, and I think maybe it also would have been helpful for me to work in a more like user-facing product context where it would have been more ambiguous work. So maybe I would have told myself, like, dude, you're in an ivory tower with these abstract, almost mathematical problems that you're working on. If you want to have impact in the real world, like start working with things that impact the real world.
mm. So
Yeah.
true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess like when you were where do you hope to see work on climate being in a few years from now? And do you have any resources from work on climate that you think are particularly helpful that listeners could take advantage of and should take advantage of?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll start with the easy part, work on climate resources that listeners should take advantage of. The resources are right there on our website. So a lot of people just like join the community, join the Slack part of our community and forget about everything else. Please do not forget about everything else. We also have everything else. We have a mentorship program where you can talk to several dozen experts and like level up your skills with their help. We have all kinds of resources. We have events and workshops. And now we're spinning up upskilling programs. One is focused on early stage founders and people who are founder curious who want to become a founder. And another is focused on the cluster of roles adjacent to corporate climate action and finance. And we're going to be doing more of that. So yeah, just like keep an eye on that. But in terms of where work on climate is going in a few years, well, I guess the way I see work on climate in, say, 5 years is I think by that point, our community will be pretty much exclusively composed of people who are leading the transformation of their field. And there is a lot of fields here, so it's going to be still a lot of people. But I think by then, a work on climate will be completely unnecessary for somebody who is simply looking for a job.
Mm,
And it will not be the right fit for somebody simply looking for a job in 5 years to come and join work on climate. They will just look for a job on LinkedIn or Indeed or
mm,
Climate Base. The other part, I think that in 5 years, the industry body that we're building will have been built and will be in full swing and will be international, powerful, and have a lot of successes and a lot of support from the major other powerful institutions that shape climate action and shape the workforce. So I'm imagining that by then we will be doing, large international collaborative projects on, say, how to solve the shortage of chemists in Australia, period, something like that. Or like how to make sure that all accountants in India know carbon accounting. Right, so that scale of work.
Cool. Yeah, no, I will continue to definitely take advantage of the resources Work on Climate provides for, I guess, like working within teams and like building and scaling teams, because Work on Climate is a huge group of volunteers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the advice here might be somewhat volunteer specific. I think a lot of this is easier when you have a like a full-time paid team. We now have 5 full-time staff plus a consultant and about 60 to 70 volunteers. Yeah, I mean the things that work are largely, I suspect, the same things that work in a startup of slightly smaller size. So we have just like a standard hierarchical team structure. We obviously, all the leads have to learn management skills well, and managing volunteers is management on hard mode, because like people are not getting paid and they don't think that anything is going to happen if they don't do the work, so to speak. Uh, so you have to be very careful when recruiting people and be screening for things that actually end up being issues like availability or specific skills. So what else? Yeah, at some point we also had to invest into creating like people ops type systems. So invest in automating our processes for volunteer onboarding, offboarding, recruiting, start working with again, still as volunteers, with recruiters and so on. So I don't know how to summarize this. I'm not really sure that my advice translates to like scaling a startup where everybody's paid from 1 person to 70. I don't think I have that experience to share yet.
For listeners who want to keep up with the work that you do, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. So just follow me on LinkedIn, follow Work on Climate on LinkedIn. That's everything important that happens, it's there.
Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate your time, and I learned a lot from this conversation.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed the conversation too.